In our headlines on this Wednesday, August 5th, here in South Korea. The heat wave here refuses to loosen its grip on the country, and city officials are stepping up emergency efforts to shield their residents from the dangerous temperatures. Meanwhile, the Lee Jae-myung administration lays out its diplomatic priorities with a renewed emphasis on nuclear-powered submarines, wartime operational control, and peace on the Korean peninsula. US President Donald Trump says a breakthrough in talks to reopen the Strait of Hormuz may be imminent as both the US and Iran address the issue with regional mediators. Here in South Korea, it's no longer just another sweltering summer. It's a heat wave that's refusing to relent, and across the country, temperatures, official and unofficial, are rewriting record books. Our Park Junan starts us off.
As of 11 a.m. Wednesday, the Korea Meteorological Administration had expanded its highest-level heatwave warning, serious heatwave warning, to cover 43% of the greater Seoul area. The highest level of alert was also issued for the city of Cheongyang in Chungcheongnam-do Province. This is the very first time for the Chungcheong region. A severe heatwave warning is issued when an area's daily maximum feels-like temperature has reached 35 degrees Celsius or higher for at least 2 consecutive days. After that, the warning is issued if either the daily maximum feels-like temperature reaches 38 degrees Celsius or higher, or the daily maximum temperature reaches 39 degrees Celsius or higher. On Tuesday, unofficial temperature readings in Seoul districts including Gangnam-gu and Guro-gu even topped 39 degrees Celsius. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration's report, this past July recorded the highest average minimum temperature on record at 23.4 degrees Celsius. The nation also experienced an average of 9.7 tropical nights, during which temperatures do not fall below 25 degrees Celsius. That easily surpassed the previous record set in 2024. The prolonged heat is taking a growing toll on public health. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency says 2 more people died from heat-related causes on Tuesday, bringing this year's death toll to 19. The number of heat-related illnesses has now surpassed 2,200 nationwide, with 186 new cases reported in a single day. The scorching weather has also disrupted professional sports. To protect the players and spectators, the Korea Baseball Organization announced that for the very first time, it will cancel all first and second team games on Wednesday and Thursday until comprehensive measures are put in place. With dangerously intense heat wave expected to continue, health officials are strongly urging people to stay hydrated, avoid prolonged outdoor activities, and seek immediate medical attention if signs of heat exhaustion appear. Park Junan, Arirang News.
And with little relief from the blistering heat, capital Seoul is stepping up its efforts to better protect its residents from the dangerous temperatures. Our Shin So-in files this report from the ground.
With feel-like temperatures reaching 38 degrees Celsius across much of Seoul, the highest level heat alert has been in place since Tuesday, while the heat island effect traps heat between buildings and asphalt. In response, the local governments converted around 4,000 community centers and senior citizen centers into cooling shelters, providing residents with free air-conditioned spaces. The temperature outside of this community center is 36 degrees Celsius. But inside the cooling shelters, the temperature can come down to 27 degrees Celsius. For residents vulnerable to extreme heat, these shelters can provide them a chance to cool off before heat exhaustion becomes a medical emergency. Listed on the Seoul Metropolitan Government's website and open for unlimited visits, cooling shelters also serve as a shared ground that infuses community spirit.
This center has served local seniors for more than 40 years, but anyone, not just members, can come in and take a break from the heat.
The National Disaster Management Research Institute says heat-related illnesses at home more than double during extreme heat, especially among elderly and low-income residents who lack regular health checkups.
If heat-related symptoms appear, you may not be able to respond on your own. So when outdoor activity is unavoidable, make sure you are with someone rather than alone.
Non-profit organizations such as the Buddhist-affiliated Wongaksa also provide relief from the heat, serving free meals that help residents regain their strength.
Preparing these meals is deeply rewarding for us. We serve simple, traditional home-style food, just like the meals people used to eat at home.
Founded in 1993, the center operates a year-round without a single day off, providing a daily meal to about 250 to 300 people.
I come here 3 or 4 times a week. Eating out is too expensive, so this free meal helps me save around 12 to 13,000 won each time.
For workers who usually consume caffeine, its diuretic effect can accelerate dehydration by causing the body to lose more fluid. To help offset that risk, free bottled water is handed out to pedestrians across the city. Experts say headaches and fatigues are among the earliest signs of heat-related illness, advising people to avoid unnecessary outdoor activity between noon and 5 p.m. when temperatures are typically at their highest. Shin So-eun, Arirang News.
Also here in the local front, the Lee Jae-myung administration has laid out its foreign policy roadmap for the second half of this year, aimed at building nuclear-powered submarines, regaining wartime operational control, and engaging North Korea. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
At a briefing on diplomacy and national security for the second half of the year on this Wednesday, President Lee Jae-myung emphasized that peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula are the foundation for the nation's future.
우리 대한민국의 대도약 그리고 지속적인 성장 거기다 국민들의 더 나은 삶을 위해서는 한반도의 평화와 안정이 가장 중요합니다.
To support this vision, the Foreign Ministry is driving a G7 plus diplomatic initiative, having already completed bilateral summits with the leaders of the U.S., China, and Japan within the president's first year. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun announced that Seoul will expedite consultations with Washington to secure the requirements to build nuclear-powered submarines, as well as uranium enrichment and reprocessing capabilities. On the defense front, the government is accelerating efforts to achieve a self-reliant military posture.
어떤 외부의 도움도 없이 우리 스스로의 힘으로서 지켜나가는 자주 국방은 우리의 가장 큰 과제다. 그리고 당연히 주권의 일부인 군 지휘권도 스스로 행사해야 되겠죠. 당연히.
The Ministry of National Defense confirmed it is holding multi-channel talks with the U.S. to regain wartime operational control, or OPCON. Partial evaluations for an OPCON transfer will be conducted during the upcoming Ulchi Freedom Shield joint exercises, aligning with President Lee's directive that independent military command is a core element of national sovereignty. Regarding inter-Korean relations, President Lee ordered the Unification Ministry to maintain a policy of peace and coexistence, stressing that abandoning engagement strategies will be harmful despite the current freeze in dialogue.
근데 그건 결국 국민들한테는 나쁘죠. 국가 공동체에게는 해악이죠. 그래서 힘들긴 하지만 우리가 평화와 공존의 정책을 계속해 나가야 되겠다.
To break the deadlock, the Unification Ministry plans to push for an inter-Korean summit during the first half of the president's term. The ministry aims to utilize the upcoming APEC summit to launch a 4-party Korean Peninsula peace process, actively seeking China's role in the initiative. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The world's most critical oil shipping route could soon reopen as negotiators reportedly close in on a deal to restore safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young has the latest.
US President Donald Trump says the Strait of Hormuz will reopen soon, warning Iran could otherwise face what he called a very powerful attack. Speaking to Fox News on Tuesday local time, Trump said the United States was having very good discussions with Iran and claimed Tehran was eager for an agreement after months of conflict. But he added that the only thing that matters is action, saying Washington would wait to see what happens. His remarks came as officials on both sides signaled progress towards reopening the strategic waterway. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Tuesday that Washington was involved in talks between Iran and Oman aimed at allowing more vessels to pass safely through the waterway.
I think that there's a conversation and a negotiation that we are involved in between Oman and Iran on how more ships can be able to go through there safely in the short term as we move towards these longer term talks about denuclearization. And suffice it to say there's been progress made in those talks, but not finality yet. We're hoping that will happen very shortly.
While Rubio was cautious to stress no final agreement had yet been reached, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was more optimistic. Bessent said an agreement could come as early as Tuesday or Wednesday to allow vessels to travel freely through the strait. But he did not directly answer whether Iran would be permitted to charge ships a passage. Tehran, meanwhile, maintains that it is negotiating with Oman, not directly with the United States, but said Tuesday that the talks were positive and ongoing. The strait remains largely blocked following the outbreak of the US-Israeli war with Iran in late February. Young, Arirang News.
In other news, the South Korean currency is drawing fresh attention after the U.S. Treasury Secretary highlighted its recent volatility alongside the yen. Our Kim Bo-kyung covers his remarks and their broader implications.
While underscoring the importance of a stable yen, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Tuesday pointed to the South Korean won's excessive volatility. The remarks came during an interview with CNBC following a joint intervention by Washington and Tokyo in the foreign exchange market last week to support the yen. He said that the yen's stability matters for the entire region given Japan's role in global trade, the size of its economy, and its contribution to global savings. He also warned that prolonged weakness in the Japanese currency could spill over into neighboring economies, citing excessive volatility in the Korean won. In fact, the won has largely moved in tandem with the yen in recent years, though with even greater volatility. The won depreciated 12.5% against the dollar in 2024, exceeding the yen's 10.6% decline over the same period. This year, while the yen fell 2% against the dollar, the won declined 4.6% in May, and in June, the yen rebounded 3.8%, while the won weakened 7.1%. Bessent's remarks suggest that the U.S. administration believes the won should return to a more stable path, potentially giving South Korean authorities greater room to take proactive steps to stabilize the foreign exchange market. One expert, however, does say that even if the authorities intervene, there wouldn't be much change.
Even if Korea tried to intervene in the foreign exchange market, the problem is most of the fundamental movement in the currency flows were due to stock markets and firms' fears about future dollar rates and possible investment in the United States. So even if the foreign exchange currency authorities tried to intervene in the dollar-won market, it probably wouldn't have done much good.
The same expert added that it remains to be seen whether Bessent will follow up with concrete measures to help stabilize the won. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's foreign exchange reserves rose for the second month in a row in July. According to the Bank of Korea on this Wednesday, the reserve stood at over $427.9 billion at the end of July, up $590 million on month. The latest increase follows a $370 million gain in June. The central bank linked the increase to the issuance of foreign exchange stabilization bonds and a rise in the U.S. dollar value of foreign currency assets denominated in other currencies. By asset type, deposits rose by $860 million, while securities holdings fell by $340 million. Korea ranked 10th globally in foreign exchange reserves, up from 13th place a month earlier. Wall Street appears to be betting big on South Korean memory chip giants as the AI boom fuels a surge in advanced memory technology. Our Baek Joo-hee explains.
At least 6 major Wall Street firms, including Bank of America and UBS, have recently initiated coverage on SK hynix ADRs with buy or overweight investment ratings. Bank of America highlighted that robust demand from U.S. tech giants, leadership in advanced memory, and soaring AI infrastructure spending are setting the stage for supercycle level earnings. Rosenblatt Securities set a price target of $320, implying over 120% upside for Monday's close. Boosted by the bullish momentum, SK hynix ADRs closed up 8.17% at $154.38 in New York on Tuesday. Along with market optimism, major tech updates were unveiled in Silicon Valley. Samsung Electronics showcased its next-generation memory solutions at the Future of Memory and Storage 2026 conference on Tuesday local time. Samsung unveiled its 3D ZHBM architecture, which stacks memory directly on top of AI accelerators rather than side by side. By minimizing data travel distance, ZHBM delivers up to 8 times the performance and triple the energy efficiency compared to upcoming HBM5 standards. Samsung also introduced Z-Nando for on-device AI, matching DRAM server speeds at 1/6 the cost. Alongside this, it unveiled the industry's first 400-layer 10th generation VNAND, boosting storage density by 58%. These technical strides align with positive long-term market projections. On Tuesday, an analyst from market research firm Yole Group projected that Korea will maintain its undisputed memory dominance through at least 2031, supported by aggressive corporate investments and government plans to double wafer capacity. Market analysts report that as the industry shifts into AI 2.0 centered on inference, memory development cycles have shrunk from 18 months to 12. This faster pace, combined with big tech's push for custom AI chips, is expected to loosen NVIDIA's dominance, creating new growth opportunities for agile Korean suppliers. 백주희, Arirang News.
And South Korea's minimum wage for next year has been finalized at 10,700 Korean won per hour, roughly $7.51. Now, this marks an increase of 27 cents from this year to be applied equally at all workplaces across all industries. While both the labor sector and the small business community submitted objections, the Labor Ministry dismissed all claims, ruling that neither met the grounds for a redeliberation. From herbal therapies to acupuncture, traditional Korean medicine is emerging as the next global attraction in K-medical tourism. Our culture correspondent Hong Seo-jung reports.
Eyes covered and completely relaxed, foreign visitors experience automated acupressure beds, a modern take on traditional Korean meridian massage to boost circulation. Nearby, guests try automated hand massages using camellia oil-infused herbal masks.
It's not like a one-size-fits-all, which sometimes I feel like in America that's kind of how it is. So I really appreciate how personalized it is.
These experiences are part of a wellness program run by the K-Medi Center, an organization dedicated to promoting traditional Korean medicine.
Recently, thanks to its appearance on Netflix's K-pop Demon Hunters, interest in our center has surged, bringing in more visitors from around the world.
In a traditional pavilion, tourists soak their feet in warm water infused with seasonal medicinal herbs like chrysanthemum.
I feel like they have a lot of evidence suggesting that the Korean practices here lead to strong health outcomes, so relaxing.
Long known for cosmetic procedures, Korean medical tourism is expanding into traditional medicine, offering international visitors a uniquely holistic approach to wellness. As interest in traditional Korean medicine grows, more people are experiencing treatments like acupuncture or skin therapy firsthand. Following a thorough consultation and diagnosis, patients receive acupuncture therapy and facial treatments infused with traditional herbal ingredients.
Unlike conventional skin boosters, this formula incorporates traditional Korean medicine. We transformed Hwangneon Haedoktang, a classic herbal remedy, into a modern cosmetic treatment.
As a result, foreign tourists are expanding their beauty itineraries, visiting not just conventional dermatology clinics, but traditional Korean medicine clinics for advanced skincare.
Korea is very good for their health technology, and then also for the skincare treatments and everything. So that's why I want to try for this one, for like the traditional one.
Combining affordability with proven effectiveness, K-medical tourism continues to rise in popularity, with traditional Korean medicine expected to become a key global draw. Hong Seo-jung, Arirang News.
This is the world now. In the United States, police in Washington state on Monday have arrested a man they say deliberately started one of 3 wildfires burning around Spokane. More than 700 homes and other buildings have burned down around Spokane, and 64,000 people have been told to evacuate. Investigators say 37-year-old Aaron Farinacci set a roadside patch of grass alight with matches or a lighter on Saturday. That fire swept out of State Park into wooded neighborhoods, turning homes to ash and melting cars. The fire burned more than 10,000 acres on the northern edge of Spokane, a city of 230,000. It is still not contained. No deaths have been reported, but officials expect that to change as crews reach areas they currently cannot get to. SpaceX has beaten Wall Street's expectations in its first earnings report as a public company. But its shares fell on Tuesday due to higher than expected spending on its artificial intelligence business. Revenue came in at $7.8 billion, well ahead of forecasts and up from $4.7 billion in the first quarter. But SpaceX poured $15.8 billion into artificial intelligence, more than double what it spent in the first 3 months of the year. Investors worry that spending on that scale will not pay for itself, and the stock slipped in after-hours trading. Starlink, its satellite internet service, has passed 12 million subscribers, doubling from a year earlier. Guatemala is on alert after the Fuego volcano erupted on Monday, sending gas and ash into the sky and sending lava down its slopes. Emergency officials have moved at least 659 people out of 8 villages into shelters and expect about 10 more communities to follow. A major highway near the volcano is closed, and schools in nearby towns are shut. The Fuego volcano is one of Central America's most active volcanoes. An eruption in 2018 killed hundreds of people and wiped out an entire village. In Japan, 3 lions have died within a week at a zoo in western Tokyo, and staff believe the heat was the cause. Autopsies found dehydration and multiple organ failure in all 3 animals. A zoo representative said on Monday it is, quote, the first time we've experienced anything like this. 3 more lions are still unwell and unable to stand. Across Japan, more than 43,000 people have been taken to hospital for heat stroke this summer. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Heatwave warnings now cover almost the entire western side of the country, and all of Seoul is now under a severe heatwave warning, the highest level in the nation. Easterly winds are crossing the Taebaek Mountains, and as that air comes down the western side, it gets even hotter, pushing temperatures up even further. And we're not getting much of a break after sunset either, so please take the heat seriously day and night. As temperatures shoot up, the atmosphere will also become unstable. Through this evening, we could see some passing showers around Seoul and other parts of the capital region, as well as the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do and Jeollado provinces. We're looking at anywhere from 5 to 40 millimeters, so keep an umbrella handy on your way home. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 27 degrees, Daejeon 25 and Daegu 26 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will soar to 39 degrees, Daegu 36 degrees, Busan 33 degrees. Looking ahead, this extreme heat will continue around the clock. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us.
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace, or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view, as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
The U.S. has a new ambassador here in South Korea at a pivotal moment for the alliance as both countries navigate evolving security challenges, economic uncertainty, and growing strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, August 5th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. U.S. Ambassador Michelle Park-Steele has pledged to strengthen bilateral ties and deepen cooperation across a range of shared priorities. Today we take a closer look at what her appointment could mean for the future of the South Korea-U.S. alliance. For more on this, I have Thomas with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here as always.
I also have Peter, a research fellow at the Arson Institute for Policy Studies with us. Peter, Dr. Lee, it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me back here in person.
Lovely. Thomas, we start with you. Let's begin with some background information about the new U.S. ambassador to South Korea.
Sure. So Ambassador Steele, as I'm sure everyone knows by now, is a Korean American. She's a Republican politician, you know, more of a political hire. She doesn't come from a sort of diplomatic background, but she was in the U.S. House of Representatives for a couple of terms, representing California from 2020 to 24. Was nominated by President Trump in April, just confirmed by the U.S. Senate last month. And she's actually filling a post that's been vacant since the previous U.S. Ambassador, Philip Goldberg, left in January of last year. Yeah, she's the second Korean American actually to serve as the U.S. ambassador, following Sung Kim, who was here in 2011 to 2014. You know, she recently penned an op-ed in Yonhap news agency, and you know, there's not a lot to glean from it, and everything she's kind of said publicly so far has been, you know, relatively boilerplate, talking about the sort of ironclad alliance, things like that. You know, she mentioned in her op-ed in Yonhap that you know, she mentioned her background as a Korean American being sort of living testament to the bond between the two nations. But you know, one thing you could sort of take away perhaps from this op-ed is that she really mentioned Trump quite a bit. You know, sort of saying that she will, you know, together we will carry President Trump's vision for this alliance forward, you know, and she mentioned sort of Trump and Trump's meeting with President Lee Jae-myung at the APEC conference in Gyeongju, and sort of talked about, you know, executing the vision that was laid out in Gyeongju. But, you know, she just sort of mentioned him a number of times. That sort of signals this is kind of where this State Department is these days, and we'll certainly get into it more. But, you know, clearly there's a lot of, you know, Trump's agenda that's going to be sort of put forward and centered, you know, in this idea of kind of the State Department as a bit of a vehicle for his overall agenda is I would say stronger than usual in the kind of American foreign policy space. So we'll see. We're definitely going to see how that plays out.
Right, for sure. Peter, from Seoul's perspective, what will the new U.S. ambassador need to accomplish in the first few months to build confidence in the alliance, do you think?
So I think in terms of what she has to accomplish, it's quite obvious that she has to strengthen the economic technology pillar of the alliance in terms of the $350 billion strategic trade investment package, but then also the security pillar of the alliance, which is really the cornerstone in terms of the alliance modernization, but burden sharing issues, Korean defense spending. But I think from Korea's perspective, you know, what makes Ambassador Steele unique, and just going back to some of the points that Thomas was making there, you know, there is the first part, which is her Korean American identity, and she's very much played into that so far in her very short couple of days that she's been ambassador here, you know, highlighting the fact that she is Korean American. And so I think that is an opportunity for Korea to show, you know, cultural sort of understanding, sort of people-to-people connections with the United States at this very important time. The second part is what Thomas mentioned around her political identity. And she is a very strong Republican, and so she was, for instance, a member of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus. She's a very strong China hawk, and that's an area where there is potential risk with the current Lee Jae-myung administration. And so I think for Korea, it's how to leverage both of those parts of her role as ambassador to the interests of the alliance. I think that's going to be a huge, opportunity and task for the next 2.5 years, while President Trump is at least in office.
Right. Thomas, you've reported extensively on how domestic politics in both, of course, Washington and Seoul increasingly shape the alliance. How much of Ambassador Steele's job will be managing politics as much as diplomacy, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a heavy political component. There's always been that level. I mean, there's always been politics in terms of, the diplomatic relationship. And it's not to say the U.S. and South Korea have not had sort of complicated, relationships in the past. And there are a lot of diplomatic issues that are very key to being addressed. I mean, the relationship is changing sort of just in a general way. And, as Peter was mentioning, there's just kind of the technology component, and there's changing security positions as well. And there's just, there's really a lot of things that have to still be ironed out from the, summit agreement from last year. I mean, nuclear submarines, enhanced uranium enrichment rights, things like that. So there's a lot on the plate diplomatically, but there is this major political component to, clearly, as we both mentioned, she is a political sort of appointee under Trump, and Trump in general, his foreign policy has, taken kind of this personalized approach, or this approach where, there's a lot of decisions that are being made that may be driven by, even among his allies, by whims or changing positions or his own sort of domestic interests. So there's a lot that is not kind of traditionally handled maybe under the sort of framework of foreign policy in the past. And, I mean, there's a lot of ways we could sort of look at it, but I think from here and from the perspective here, I think she's definitely going to be seen through a political lens. And we've already seen that kind of springing up in her appointment. There was protests, we were talking about it before the show, there's some protesters at the airport when she came from the sort of left, the left-leaning side, and she is being seen and sort of painted as a kind of right-wing, MAGA-aligned partisan figure. And, she isn't a career diplomat, so that's going to be a question that's going to have to be answered. There's some sense, I mean, there has been some reporting from maybe figures on the right seeing her as, she's going to be more aligned with some of our positions about, just the, that sort of political division that sprung up during the whole Yoon Suk-yeol impeachment proceeding, in the sense of, maybe she's going to be sort of represent our concerns going forward. And so there's really a lot of issues. And, to talk to her background again, it was, she does come out of this position of kind of strong, hawkish on North Korea, hawkish towards China. That's how she was in her congressional career, and that's kind of her background from the sort of Korean Americans right-wing community that sort of has that strong leaning in the U.S. So that's going to come into play. Is that going to clash with this current administration's stance towards North Korea? So there's just going to be a lot that is sort of looked at under a political microscope. And, we're going to have to see how much, she's going to foreground sort of maybe Washington's and the Trump administration's sort of political hobby horses or versus, all the serious diplomatic issues going on, But that isn't to say as well that it's not, within this embassy, there still are a number of career diplomats. She's not going to be running things solo. So, yeah, we'll it's definitely going to be a component. We'll have to see how much of one it is.
Right, indeed. Peter, your research, it's emphasized the importance of strengthening the alliance for an increasingly contested Indo-Pacific. Where can Ambassador Steele perhaps make the biggest strategic impact?
So I think at least there are 3 areas where I think she really has an important role to play. And so the first one is really making sure that the last year's joint fact sheet actually lands and is actually implemented in a reasonable time frame. And we're almost halfway through President Trump's second term now. And so there is a great sense of urgency in the United States, but also here in Korea, to start implementing what was announced last year in November, right? So everything from nuclear-powered submarines to shipbuilding investments to trade deals and so forth. So I think that's the first area where she really has to get that moving. The second, I think, from a regional and even a global standpoint is the defense industrial sort of cooperation between South Korea and the United States. We've seen how the Iran war, for instance, has really depleted US munition stockpiles. So there's a great sense of urgency in the United States around how to resupply, restock its munitions, its military industrial base. And so there is an opportunity there for Korea to play a bigger role with the US, but also in the region. And I think third, and it goes back to Ambassador Steele's identity we were talking about, she is a Korean American, but she spent a lot of time in Japan in her childhood. So she's someone who's said on the record that Japan is her second language and English is her third. And so this is something where she can really lead trilateral cooperation between Korea, the US, and Japan. I think it's an area where the current Lee Jae-myung administration is very keen to push forward on that. The president has very good relations with Prime Minister Takaichi. So I think that's an area where Ambassador Steele can really drive that momentum forward in terms of trilateral cooperation as well.
All right. Keeping this in mind then, Thomas, do you suppose that trade, technology, supply chain resilience, all this are becoming as important as the traditional military alliance between Seoul and Washington?
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. They've become these sorts of all these issues around semiconductors, critical minerals, AI, batteries, export controls. They're all sort of seen as these core national security issues, beyond just kind of their traditional military and defense positioning, and so both sides see them as real national security assets, and that's become a big part of this bilateral relationship. I mean, clearly, South Korea as a major semiconductor exporter, and we've talked about their shipbuilding component and some of these other agreements. So it's a huge component of the relationship that it has just far-reaching ramifications in both countries too. I mean, something like U.S. export controls, affects Korean firms very directly, and supply chain resilience is really seen as this sort of defense planning factor now. And, underlying a lot of this obviously is China and the sort of U.S. stance towards China, U.S. tech restrictions, kind of aimed at China's capabilities, whereas you have South Korea still being deeply intertwined with China. So those are really important issues. And so I think Seoul is kind of balancing these alliance expectations with the the trade tech agenda becoming this politically has been a politically delicate situation, and this is an area where we'll see what is the political skill that Ambassador Steele can bring to it. I thought the point Peter made about her Japan connection is also a really will be an interesting factor going forward. I mean, it's not to say military cooperation is not still really central, and I mean we're also seeing that's in this kind of transitional phase where it's not strictly North Korea or peninsula focused as it traditionally has been. We've seen this, this much talk about modernizing the alliance and sort of, facing differently, facing more towards the region. That also does tie into sort of Japan's cooperation in this trilateral. So we're seeing a lot of that, all this extended deterrence, joint exercises, missile defense are foundational, but they're not kind of just defining the relationship in the same way as purely as before.
Right. Peter, I'd like to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. You spoke about the prospects of shipbuilding partnership between the two countries. How does that particular partnership look to contribute to the overall alliance, do you think?
So my own view is I think shipbuilding is going to be probably the most important area of ROK-US alliance cooperation for the remainder of President Trump's term. And you think about, before Ambassador Steele arrived in Korea, she attended the launch of the Korea-US Shipbuilding Partnership Center in Washington, right? And so she was making a very explicit commitment. She met with Acting Secretary of the Navy, Hung Kao. So she knows that this is the priority for President Trump. And so if you think, well, why is President Trump so almost obsessed with shipbuilding? It's because I think on the naval side, the US is very clearly losing the naval arms race to China. But even on the commercial side, China now controls anywhere from 60 to 70% of global commercial shipbuilding. The US, by contrast, has about 0.03%. So America builds about 3 to 4 ships a year. Where does Korea fit into that? Korea builds about 20 to 30%. So Korea is really the only alternative America has right now to competing with China, to maintaining a maritime balance of power. And so in both of those areas, naval and commercial, President Trump has made shipbuilding a centerpiece of alliance cooperation with South Korea. And that's why last year's trade deal had $150 billion dedicated to shipbuilding investments by Korea. And so all of Korea's major shipbuilders, so HD Hyundai, Hanwha Ocean, Samsung Heavy, they're all really stepping up. And so when she was at this partnership center unveiling, they had 15 MOUs signed between Korean and American shipbuilders. So I think in that sense, this is the opportunity for Korea to demonstrate, that it can, step up and share the burden for a really important issue that, is at President Trump's, top of mind, I think, at the moment.
Right, indeed. Thomas, what will be the clearest sign, perhaps, after Ambassador Seal's first year that her tenure is actually strengthening the alliance rather than simply maintaining it?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot that could demonstrate that, but I think, just sort of maybe evidence that she's moving the relationship forward in some of these areas there's a lot that still sort of is on the table that needs to get sort of finalized and done. So there's this sort of, joint agreement and sort of moving forward with some of these investment, agreements and the nuclear submarine building and the shipbuilding components. I mean, sort of landing those things would be a big step, and just maybe some further breakthroughs on kind of tech supply chain coordination. I mean, some kind of framework, on semiconductors or AI critical minerals. There's a lot of areas if we could, see some of that, being better defined, and maybe just kind of a, less of a sense of friction on some of these political alliance issues. I mean, something like defense burden sharing always sort of seems to come up as a hot button issue. So sort of smoother negotiations on those fronts, maybe less kind of public disagreements over some of these things like extended deterrence commitments, maybe some kind of more predictable messaging between Washington and Seoul on issues like China and North Korea. I would say one thing that may be interesting to see from the Lee Jae-myung's administration's perspective, I mean, as much as she's coming from this hawkish North Korea background and she sort of represents that, at the same time, President Trump has kind of not taken the traditional sort of more right-leaning or Republican stance towards North Korea in the sense that he's, often been very open. He's discussed again, in this term of wanting to meet and negotiate with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So, and that's something clearly that President Lee has mentioned many, many times as wanting to work with the U.S., to act. He calls, Trump the peacemaker and wants South Korea to be the pacemaker and sort of, pushing this forward. I mean, the Unification Ministry today just sort of released their work plan for the second half of the year, and they talked a lot about these issues. So that would be an interesting thing to see actually sort of take place. Will there be a chance for, a Trump-Kim summit, or, will she be able to kind of push forward maybe some of the, this more like peace-facing agenda that the Lee Jae-myung administration really wants to pursue? I mean, that would be another interesting sign, perhaps.
Right, something to look forward to. Peter, you may need a crystal ball for this next question, but I wonder, where do you expect the South Korea-US alliance to be by the end of her term in office?
So I think, if we were to assume that Ambassador Steele stays for the duration of President Trump's term, so she has about 2.5 years left, I think it really depends on how the upcoming midterm elections go in the United States. That will very much shape President Trump's agenda and his priorities for the rest of his term. But having said that, I think it's very easy to take a pessimistic outlook and imagine that in the next 2.5 years, things go badly and Korea ends up in a situation such as Canada or maybe Denmark, where you have this very hostile relationship with America, a lot of tensions around trade and trust and ideology and so forth. And she could have a very challenging time. But I think the optimistic side is, there are still areas where we can look to. For instance, the US continues to call Korea a model ally, right? And so there is, great attraction to South Korea at the moment. And so if she were to build on that, we would see in the next 2.5 years, the first Korean-American ships being built, Korean investment, Korea-US working together in the region. So I think there is that possibility also. But I think a lot depends on her role as ambassador here for the next 2.5 years, I think. That would be my crystal ball guess.
Right, indeed. And with regard to North Korea, Thomas, I wonder, do you suppose her presence here in South Korea raises the prospects of an encounter between Mr. Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un?
I would say, judging by her background, I would say probably not. Just coming from where she sort of has traditionally positioned herself. But again, if she's really acting more as Trump's kind of, voice or pushing for his political agenda. I mean, it would be an interesting thing to see. I mean, because he has certainly expressed many times, a desire to re-engage with Kim Jong-un, and he's, it hasn't been, on the front of his to-do list just because, so many other things have been going on. But, he does mention it on a sort of any opportunity to bring it up. And, clearly the Lee Jae-myung administration is frequently mentioning that. So you would think she would be an unlikely sort of vessel for this to go forward. But, it is something that is, from Trump's perspective, something he's expressed wanting to do. So it would be kind of a fascinating turn of events if that were the case.
Right, so the possibility remains then. All right, Thomas, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Peter, our Dr. Lee at the Arson Institute for Policy Studies, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, many pundits say the real test for Ambassador Steele will be whether she can turn a strong alliance into a more resilient partnership for the challenges ahead. Thank you for watching.
오늘은 대한민국 임시정부를 이끌었던 김구 선생님의 백범일지를 살펴볼 거예요.